let's move on to our member-specific segments. Changes. What are we talking about, Paul?
Well, I was going to talk about, Love is Blind.
Gosh, it would have been nice if we had a song to transition into this.
But
Love is Blind. How dare you?
Hey, it's premium trash TV.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway,
why don't you just watch Love Island UK? Just watch.
Oh, is that something?
90 Day Fiance.
Let's see. Expansions. So I was thinking about change, and I didn't exactly know what to talk about. And I was thinking about how games get, I don't want to say stale, but you play it and then I guess you solve them, right? I think where you go oh, I know how to play this game, and there's one of 8, 10 ways to win or whatever, and it stays on the shelf, and then it gets a sticker, and then it gets sold. and so I think the way that people combat this is they go, a change needs to happen, and it comes down to expansions. There are a lot of, but I feel like there are different categories of expansions. So when I start thinking about it, ECLIPSE, for example, we talk about this. You feel like it's a real balance expansion, and it does add a bunch of things. For me, I think it's a pretty cosmetic expansion, and that's not a diss.
I think it's definitely both.
Yeah,
right?
it definitely has elements of both. But I don't know if I would buy ECLIPSE if it was just adding, the rebalance and the addition of the other expansions.
Well,
2.0.
I mean, think about it this way: if it was just that, it wouldn't be a whole new box.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be a whole new thing. It would be a small box with new tech tiles, and that's about it, and a new rule set. So that's all it would be. So for $20, would you buy the rules tweak?
I know, you bought, at least the first edition of ECLIPSE, and then the expansion of ECLIPSE. I forgot what it's called. And so
Rise of the Ancients.
Yeah, something there's some new races, and we played that a total of 0 times.
No, we used pieces of it. We used parts of it. It's a modular expansion, so there were several different parts of it, and we did
Okay.
a bunch of it. We just didn't use all of it. Which I will talk about, because there are expansions that sometimes go too far. They take a game that already is pretty stuffed, and they overstuff it.
Sure.
And sometimes that can be that can be a barrier to getting that on the table.
Yeah. So I started thinking about how, because I categorize things, and so I was thinking about what types of expansions are there, and and I think the first one I think of is fixes. There's something broken or something not quite perfect in a game, and after a series, 8 months, 10 months, or whatever, they go, oh, I can fix this. And I think that's a very common type expansion.
Railroad Evolution could not be a more perfect example of that. It is a game that truly is kind of broken, and they have fixed it. They have utterly and completely fixed it. ECLIPSE, I don't think is that.
I don't think so.
Because I don't think it was broken, but it did have some strategies that were becoming pretty dominant, and so they tweaked it more than fixed it.
Yeah, I think in the end with ECLIPSE, what happened was they found that there are certain races, even right now, the races, although they're more balanced, I feel like there is still the prevalent strategy with this race. This race pretty much has to try this to feed into its power, and that can be problematic, but not nearly as bad as, I think ultimately they decided, hey, the fun is being weaseled out with the meta. Let's adjust, these elements so that the fun is back in its sweet spot.
Yeah, and when you're talking about a six player 4X game with tons of moving parts, it's impossible to have nailed that on the first try. People are going to figure out, oh, you know what, this strategy works better, and period, and that's all it is.
Yep.
But fixes are a different thing. Fixes are, oh, this game does not sing. It should have sang, but it doesn't, and here's why, and let's do this.
Yeah. The next type that I was thinking about is content. Basically, take Sulkin, for example. Zulkin, great game. Base game, great.
Oh yeah.
And I think people wanted more. I don't think anyone thinks Zulkin is broken. But then you come with expansion. Let's add asymmetric powers, or and then is there a third one? A third expansion, or is it just those?
I don't think there is. I think it's just Tribes and Prophecies.
Okay.
I think that's the expansion, which is, for me, I call that more complexity.
Okay.
I think for me, those expansions are okay. You totally get this game. Now we're going to add a little more complexity to it by adding starting player powers or by adding this new mechanism that comes in there. Also realize that particular expansion adds a fifth player.
Sure. Which is probably another feature that where you go, oh, we can adjust this game. Like I think like the Agricola decks, here's more content.
Yes.
Yeah. So like it and I think that's very common to have. Like I want more of this game, but so let's add more stuff, and so people can have this variety. I think
my favorite expansions are more complexity expansions. My least favorite expansions are also more complexity expansions.
It's rough. Like,
right? Either one. It's either going to be great or it's going to be
first or last.
Yes.
And I think ultimately the question is like. I think for you, the holy expansion.
Let's wait. I think everybody knows already. Like the greatest expansion
of all time
ever designed.
That's right.
Is Karl-Heinz Schmiel's expansion to Tribune. The Tribune expansion. Don't even look for it; it's impossible to find. But they're putting out a new edition of Tribune, and hopefully they will have that in there. It takes a game that was pretty darn good and turned it into something that is exceptional. And the design of the expansion itself is exceptional in that you have a very tight worker placement set collection game, and you add a sixth player. It was a 5-player game that played very well at 4 and 5, and then they add a sixth player without adding more to the game. Literally, the sixth player plays an entirely different game. They do not have workers to put out on the board. In a worker placement game, they play a game where they have 3 mega actions they have on their turn to combat the 5 or 6 actions that the other players have, in which they're zigging when you zag. Whatever you leave behind and don't take, they get to take. Whatever you're doing, they get to glom on. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating design. It really is.
And so so I feel like that kind of synthesizes everything. Where you add, you add complexity, you add
a player,
you add, what you call it, new mechanics,
fixes. I mean, it's a race game in which you're trying to, and by race game I just mean a person will trigger the end of the game when they have met certain conditions, as opposed to it being a limited number of rounds. One of the conditions was significantly harder to achieve than all of the other conditions, to the point where it was a little bit of a problem. And so with the expansion, there are now more avenues to get that condition met. Sure. And it becomes significantly easier. And there are 2 new conditions that are added into the game that didn't exist before.
And so when I thought of all these categories of stuff, I go so what makes an expansion successful? What makes change, because the worst case is when no one wants an expansion, and here you go, buy the expansion, and now you're like, oh, I gotta buy it. I don't want it yet because I'm still not done with this. And,
sure.
And it feels like a money grab. I guess in screenwriting it'd be like exposition, where you go, oh, I don't want this exposition. I just want to see the hero do something. And you go oh, but I gotta tell you right now. I go, no, you don't.
No, you don't. No, make us want it. Right?
That's right. And so after that, what makes an expansion successful or not? What do you think, Tom? What do you feel that does?
For me, an expansion is something that gives the game new life. It is something that I have played this game tons of times, and it tends to always go this way. Now, they have put something into the game where I play it again, and it feels, if not brand new, it's got as much new as it has familiar. Sure, it hasn't changed what it is, but boy, now I play it, and everything I thought I knew about the game, I have to reassess.
Now, have you ever got an expansion? You know a game very well. You got an expansion, and then they add new content, like new powers, new whatever, and it doesn't sing.
Oh, tons. I have 3 lists here for this. I have my favorite expansions. I have my least favorite expansions.
Oh.
And I have the highest geek rating of expansions on Board Game Geek.
Well, like before we get into that, like what do you think makes it not thing? Because I was struggling with this. I was going like, here's more content, here's a game I like, and then it just doesn't seem to be doing X. Like like what X?
So my least favorite expansion of all time is Catan Cities and Nights. People love it. People love it. I hate it. I really do.
Wait, Tilly Wings.
Well, here's what it is that it takes a short, compact game that knows what it is,
Sure.
and it turns it into a much longer slog that it's like you're trying to take a Datsun and make it into a Ferrari.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just never going to be that. And for me, the trade-offs with that were just painful. It just went on forever. Eclipse Rise of the Ancients is what I consider a least favorite expansion. It's a failed expansion. For me, that's for a different reason, though. That's because the game already had so much stuff, and teaching it and seeing all that sort of stuff, there's a lot to know and a lot to learn and a lot to compute. And it never felt like, okay, now we're going to introduce these other 6 different things into this already full game. It just felt bloated. It just felt like those things were just too much.
Yeah, like I think you hit it for me on the head when you said like knowing what it is. Yeah. I think ultimately, like for me, a successful expansion doesn't forget what it's trying to do. What it's trying to achieve. What makes the game good. I think a lot of times what happens is an expansion will come out, and we'll think that more is better. And we or even different is better, and I think that it's true. But if it doesn't fit into that theme that the game is doing or the experience that the game is trying to provide, I find that those expansions wind up being unsuccessful. Like
yeah, I totally agree with that.
Like Wingspan has a new expansion, right? Like I
just different birds.
And so like my thought process is that going to be fun? Is it just going to be like, oh, now I have different births? I think one of the reasons why the Ancients failed, for you, is because like all it really did was go, oh, here's some new power, here's more lasers, here's 3 more races that have their own thing, and it just felt like it didn't really integrate and make the game feel new. Like I think that's the best. That's the
perfect. Let me give you a couple examples of that for me. Battlestar Galactica. We played the heck out of that. Absolutely love that game. The Pegasus expansion, the first expansion, had a couple good things. The Pegasus board and the new locations were interesting, but it had New Caprica, and it took the focus away from what the game was. It just destroyed the game. It was a bad for me, it's a very popular expansion. For me it was a bad expansion. Sure. It was a bad expansion because it adulterated what was great about the game. It took your focus off of what the game's focus is, whereas a great expansion enhances
that's a great way of putting
essential.
It. Yeah, no, I think like Battlestar Galactica, like you're trying to get tension.
Yes.
And it wasn't clear that adding new places and new ships and new even the characters, like I don't know if it really increased the tension. And
Not quite. No, it didn't.
And so that I think that wound up being less successful because, like there's an example where here's new content. You're going to want it. Yes, I'm going to want it. But am I going to really want it?
Yeah. Terraforming Mars. I'm on record as not liking colonies.
Sure.
I'm not crazy about Venus Next either, but and it's because it's taking my focus away from what the game is. I am out here moving spaceships around these different places, and it's no longer about Mars. I mean, it still is, but it's splitting my focus. When what I want is I want to drill down on that focus. I want to see, I want to see that focus in a new way for me.
No, I totally agree. Like although. I differ from my opinion about Terraforming Mars, but
well, yeah, you do. You don't like it.
Yeah, it's like Matt got me to get the app. We're gonna play online.
Oh, good.
We didn't play online.
Why not?
Ultimately, I think Through the Ages really has spoiled us.
Oh, it's so good.
Like everything is so much better with Through the Ages. I love that game now.
Would you like to know the highest geek rated expansions
I would.
of all time?
Of all time.
Of all time.
Chess 2.0.
Number 1 is Terraforming Mars Prelude.
Prelude. I will say, like, I will not play Terraforming Mars without Prelude.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah. All it is, and this is a great expansion, all it is it gives you some wonderful, a variable start. It gives you a variable start by giving you a choice between several different things in terms of how you are going to start your game. It gives some new and some interesting corporations to start with as well. But talk about an added bonus to that. That's really, really great. Number 2.
But actually, what I think it also is it's a minor fix. Because like by giving you those things, the game is shortened by a round or two.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And so like it's a stealth fix.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's right. It also gives you this feeling. There is a feeling in the first few rounds of Terraforming Mars that I can't do much.
Yeah, you lose focus. You don't have focus.
Right.
Know.
And this way, it's sort of you're pointed.
Yeah, exactly.
You're pointed in a direction, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going for this strategy because I start with these advantages, which is great. It's phenomenal. Second is Dominion Prosperity.
What?
Oh yeah, no. I agree with this one as well. I used to play a lot of Dominion. I don't really anymore, but Dominion came out with its first expansion was Intrigue. Second one was Seaside. Third one was Alchemy, which is one of the most reviled expansions of all time because it was a small box. It just didn't do what it was supposed to do. But then eventually, 4 or 5 down the line, they came out with Prosperity. Right around the time people were like, do I really need to get another one of these? Don't I have enough for the game?
Sure.
But this one was really quite different. It was really interesting. In Dominion, you're trying to get the most victory points, and the way you do that is by buying these expensive provinces and manors and this sort of stuff. Prosperity creates instead of creating this card that does this cool effect or this card that does this cool effect, it broadened that. It has new territories that you can get for victory points, and it has new ways to make money. So it really...
Make it the money.
To make it a money. It very, very cool. Very, very interesting. And number 3, expansion I have not played, Lords of Waterdeep, Scoundrels of Skullport.
I think I might play that.
Did you?
No, I had, Matt has it, I think, or at least had it. We play a lot of Waterdeep, at Matt's initial game nights.
Yes, back in the day. Yeah,
back in the day.
Yeah, I never cared for it, but I'll say this: now that I see that, I'm like, maybe I got to play Waterdeep again just to play the expansion. If people are saying that this is a really great expansion, sometimes I didn't really dig Waterdeep. I thought it was fine.
Sure.
But it didn't sing to me at all. If an expansion is really good, it could be something that could turn me around on that game.
It won't.
And make me change. Well, all right.
I don't. If I know your taste, I think it'd be it's good.
Maybe. Other top games were Viticulture Tuscany, which for me is a radical transformation for that game. That is a huge shift. It takes a game. I mean, now that people have the Essential Edition of Viticulture, they essentially have parts of Tuscany. But back in the day, original Viticulture is a fairly simple game, and Tuscany is what we know as Viticulture today. So it's crucial. Race for the Galaxy, The Gathering Storm is another one. That's the one where you have goal cards in Race for the Galaxy, and also does a good job of balancing it. One of my favorite expansions of all time, Agricola Farmers on the Moor. Controversial. A lot of people don't dig that. I think it is the best way to play Agricola is to play with Farmers on the Moor. I think it mitigates to some degree you must you must grow your family as quickly as possible, and that's the only way to win. It does do some things to slow that down. Seven Wonders Leaders is one of the top of all time, which is surprising because you and I don't love that, right?
I think there's a place for it. It's one of those things where I go, sure. I think we stopped after Cities, right? I think there's where we
we stopped after Cities,
and I think ultimately what we found, the way I view it, it was we found Seven Wonders, amazing simultaneous play. That's great.
Yeah.
And then it got old. I don't like our dominant strategy was like green cards. Like that would be first tier, and then every other whatever. And then the leaders, I felt like it didn't really do so much. Like you got all these. It's like another power, but it didn't really make it feel new to me.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree with that. There's one other type of expansion that we didn't mention, which is new maps.
Oh, sure. Well,
which we should.
I would put that as content, though.
I guess it is. It's just a little different because it's revitalizing what's become a stale strategic space to some degree with a new map. My favorite new map. I mean, Power Grid, Age of Steam, Russian Railroads, Concordia. They all have.
I think you're right.
Expansions.
I think map expansions. It should deserve its own thing. I think you're right. Like and I think of Age of Steam, and I think I think those player boards really add character to it in a way that even like an 18X, like you're stuck with a map, right?
Yes.
And so like how many times can you play that game before you have to go, I need to buy another box?
Virtually infinite. But it is different, right? Age of Steam also plays 2 to 6 players, and different maps have a different sweet spot, and that's a really good thing to have. And then some of them just have these rule tweaks that become amazing. Age of Steam Korea, I'm just going to say right now, is the most brain-burnery, wild expansion for Age of Steam that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Other people have different favorites. I love Korea. The idea is that Age of Steam is you have to take red cubes and deliver them to red cities. You have to take blue cubes and deliver them to blue cities. In Korea, all of the cities are gray. That's because the color of a city is the cubes that are on it. So if a city has a yellow, a blue, and a red cube, it will accept yellow and blue and red cubes until you move a red cube out of that city, and now it only takes blue and yellow. And the way the complexity jump of that game in terms of the decision-making process is stunning. So one of my favorite board expansion, map expansion.
It's really fun. I mean, it's and you're right. I agree that it's pretty brain burnery. I think that's a great board. For some reason, I like China.
China's good too. Yeah, I really like that. Like that. I'll say Power Grid, the China board, I think has the best rule change, which is really interesting.
But to wrap up though, it ultimately comes down to when you look for an expansion, for me, what I would suggest, not that I'm some great guru about this, but it's really important to know what you're looking for.
Yes.
You gotta know, you, Tom, are a person who wants to add thematic complexity. It should fit theme, and it should make the game. I don't want to say harder, but more choices, more considerations. But regardless, I think if you know what the game experience that you want is, it would really inform what your experience with an expansion would be.
Yeah.
I think the idea of just buying expansion because it's out there, unless you have infinite funds, seems a little fraught.
Yeah, I like to try and make a good decision always in those sorts of situations.
No, it's interesting, but it's or here's something you can always do: put the game away for a bit, bring it back out, and you might love it again.
You might not need the expansion.
I mean, that's what happened with the Eclipse. Although.
So realize that Matty is screaming into his phone right now.
Not yet, but on Monday he will.
He will, because he'll be saying, why haven't they mentioned Lorenzo? Why haven't they mentioned the Lorenzo expansion? The Lorenzo expansion is the greatest expansion ever. Which, by the way, I agree. It's a fantastic expansion. It adds a new tower. There were 4 towers. Now there are 5, and that adds some complexity. But more importantly, the starting situation. Once again, like Prelude, it creates a variable starting power and position that is jaw-droppingly elegant and beautiful.
It's great. I will say this: most people in this in our podcast love Lorenzo. I like it a lot, and adding the expansion, the 5th tower, right? I'm fine, whatever, because it's not real. It's just a random.
You
thing.
Are talking yourself right off the podcast.
I know,
you better be careful.
Here's what I would have preferred: if the 5th tower were something different, as opposed to just this hodgepodge of a mixture of the previous 4.
Okay, I could maybe see that, but
thanks for giving me that.
Because the problem is that it's a very, very tight game.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's a great risk in what you're suggesting.
Oh, absolutely. Like, but that's just that's my whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.